cosmogony is the account of the initial creation of being. So in the Judeo-Christian tradition, for example, that would be the emergence of order out of the initial state of chaos that's produced by God's word. So, and that's another symbolic representation. There's chaos, there's the active word, and there's order. And those are the three initial elements of being. And so the shaman, in some sense, is reducing himself as a consequence of exposure to something radical, to the initial components of his being, and then being reconstructed out of that. And that happens to you all the time, in some sense, when you encounter an obstacle that really sets you back. Because, you know, you've ordered the world, and then what you find out is the ordering of the world is incorrect. And before you can reorder it, it has to become chaotic. It does become chaotic. That's what sets you back. And then out of that chaos, you have to bring out a new order, if you can. You know, so for example, you get betrayed by someone that you love. It's like, okay, it's time to update your world model. Now, can you? Well, maybe not. You know, because if you really update it, you have to come to terms with the fact that the individual, which would also include you, is capable of radically immoral acts. Because betrayal is a radically immoral act, right? If there's anything that's actually immoral, it's people telling you one thing and then doing a whole bunch of other things behind your back. And then that brings up a question, which is, well, how the hell can people be like that? Especially because I'm also a person. And then also, how can I be so naive and moronic that that can happen to me? So, and those are not trivial questions, you know. If you don't have an answer to them at hand, what it means is that there's half the world you haven't mapped out, which would be the negative half. And you may have to revisit and revise and destroy virtually all of your assumptions about the world. So that's a reduction to chaos. It is not fun, especially if it happens accidentally. And it can be traumatic enough so you never recover from it. Post-traumatic stress disorder is like that. Like if you watch soldiers in battle and they get post-traumatic stress disorder, it's very frequent that they get it because of something they did, not because of something that happened to them. You know, so they're out on a mission of some sort and they shoot a 3-year-old child. It's like, and maybe they do it consciously. And then, you know, they wake up after they do it and they think, well, that's not me. It's like, oh yes it is. It's just not the you that you think you are. And the you that did that, man, encountering that's going to be enough to damage your consciousness. And that is what happened to people with post-traumatic stress disorder. Like, it blows them apart so badly, and not just psychologically, right? It radically alters them physiologically. Their amygdalas grow and their hippocampi shrink. If you have post-traumatic stress disorder, it's a whole brain transformation. It's like, it's no joke. And the human capacity for evil is so deep that, well, Jung, for example, he thought that you know, an accidental encounter with it was enough to, well, enough to lead to madness in some cases, and it's no joke. All right, so here's a way of thinking about things. I'm going to move through it relatively quickly. So you look at the world through a frame of reference, and the reason you do that in part is because there's more to the world than you can understand. And so that would be the actual chaos of the world. It's like, the world is very, 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 very complicated. And, you know, you're very complicated too, but you're not as complicated as the world. So you're continually surrounded by a chaotic structure that you don't really understand. And you have to frame it in with a frame of reference that only allows you to see those things that are necessary for you to see at the time of your given action. And as far as I can tell, this is a cybernetic model of personality. The elements of that frame are something like, this is a basic story. You are somewhere. You're located somewhere in time and space, always. You know where that is, and you have some sense of the qualities of that localization. So people ask you about that because they ask you, well, how are you doing? And what they're asking is, you know, what's your representation of your current state of being? And the answer to that is, generally for people, it's okay, but it's insufficient. Because if it wasn't insufficient, well, why would you be doing anything? In principle, now isn't good enough because there's something else that could be better, and that's what you're pursuing. And if it's kind of a weird thing, because it means in some sense that if you weren't dissatisfied permanently, you wouldn't be motivated to do anything. And so that's also part of the reason that a lot of human experience is characterized by somewhat negative emotions. It's like this, we're permanently dissatisfied. Why? Well, because we can act to change things. So if you're not dissatisfied, you don't want it to be better. So in some sense, what you're doing is looking at the world through a frame that says, this is what there is, and here's how I evaluate it, and here's what could be, and that's what I want. I would like to bring that about. And so that's what gives things value. It gives things value, because things that will move you to where you want to go, they have a positive value, and things that get in your way when you're trying to get to where you want to go, they have a negative value. And so that's partly how your emotions work. So, and you can put almost anything in the box of what should be. It's weird, because normally for animals, what would be in the box of what should be would be deep motivational states that are biological in origin. So maybe an animal hasn't had enough to eat, and so pop, it's feeling hungry, that's undesirable, it wants to have something to eat. And so these different underlying biological systems like hunger and thirst and sexual lust and aggression and temperature regulation and so on, they're what set the goals and the perceptual frame. So, and the emotional responses. But in human beings, we're so damn abstract that we can take that structure and we can put almost anything in that goal box. So for example, you can go to a soccer game and you can say, well, I'm going to identify with my team, so you expand the boundaries of your current state of existence to incorporate the team, and then you say, well, it's really important to me that they kick that little round sphere through that net. And so your whole nervous system says, okay, well, if that's the goal, we're going to align our emotions with that, and then, you know, guys you don't know run down the field and kick a little sphere through a net, and you're like up there, you know, celebrating in a way that you'd never do in your actual life. It's like you don't do that when you get a good grade on an exam, you know, jump up in the air and hug all your friends. You'll do that at a soccer game. It's like, what the hell is wrong with you? So, but you do that because this is a very malleable and extendable frame, and you're using it for everything. When you go into a movie theater and you watch the protagonist, you basically adopt his or her frame of reference, and then you see the whole world that's portrayed on the screen through the eyes of the person that you're identifying with. That's part of our capacity for imitation. So basically what you do, what you do there is like if you're talking to someone else and you adopt their frame of reference, it's not exactly a cognitive operation. What you seem to do is, first of all, come to some understanding about what it is that they want, and so that's the goal. Once you know what they want, you can represent them in your body. So it's almost like you're playing them as a simulation on your own biological platform. And then you can infer from your own emotional responses, if you also simulate the situation that they're in, what their emotions are, and that enables you to understand other people. So we're these weird biological computers that are capable of running other psyches on our biological platform, and that makes us able to imitate and also to understand each other.